Welcome to the Film Mechanics Screenwriting Podcast with Deri Tyton. Hey everybody, welcome. Today we're going to ask a few questions and we're going to get a few answers. The first question that we're going to ask is, what is a screenplay outline? And that answer, if I can answer it, I'm going to try to answer this the best way I can, to be honest. A screenplay outline is a breakdown of steps or scenes that connect the story together. And more often, or more times than not, it's loosely built. That means that the story can be moved around and rebuilt based on your perspective, your interests, arcs, or just based on how you feel about the development of the story. This is the next step after you decide on your structure, if you so decidedly to use a structure. And you take that structure and you place your ideas, your thoughts of what your screenplay is into an outline format. This is where you put in your outline a Act 1, an Act 2, and an Act 3. Even if you have 2 or 3 more additional acts, because there are films and there are shows where there's an Act 4, 5, and 6, things like that. What is key here is there is no one way to outline a screenplay. I'm going to repeat that. There's no one way to outline a screenplay. So whenever I work on outlines, I try to do it in a conventional way. I try to use a structure that kind of helps me. But as I go on, it must be stated for everyone else out there that's listening to this, it's not what is a screenplay outline, but more effectively, the question should be what goes in a screenplay outline. And every screenwriter should be outlining their film. This is the part of the podcast where I only make suggestions because everyone does their outline differently. Some outlines are done as a Word document. Some write theirs on color index cards. Some write theirs on small Post-it notes and post it on a wall. Some do it linearly. Some do it non-linearly. Some put their outline in a circle. Some create a timeline. I mean, whatever your design or flavor is, the goal is to create an outline that will assist you in developing your story before you write the screenplay. So what goes in a screenplay outline? Let's see. The main protagonists and their motivations or goals and journeys. The main antagonists and their motivations, goals, and journey. The setting of the world that your film is taking place in. The major conflicts. And like I said, this is about me making suggestions. Adding act breaks can be helpful. Be sure to add those supporting cast that's pivotal to your story. The plot points can be beneficial if you choose to use a structure. Beats of the structure definitely can be helpful. Some things to watch out for is, and you have to ask yourself these questions. Do your screenplay arc? Do your screenplay feel like the genre you want to write it in? Do you recognize the theme and the framework of your outline? Do you resolve all of the storylines at the end of your outline? Are you overwriting in your outline, like explaining too much? And a lot of times you can do that in your outline. And that's why the next step to this is writing a treatment. And that where you can explain a little bit more. Again, overwriting does not mean that you are not explaining, but outlines is where you can kind of bullet point all of the movements of your screenplay. Do you show your film or do you tell us your film? Can you recognize the hook in your film? Have you structured the beats correctly? Meaning, if you change one scene, sometimes you may have to go back and change something else, right? And this is all what I'm doing is just giving you the information on what goes into the screenplay outline, right? So, in writing your screenplay outline, this process needs you to pay attention to details. That's why I'm asking these questions. This is where you can start to think of the most creative investment in your screenplay. When people ask me, Deri, how do you write a screenplay outline? Which I kind of answered. I try to answer as truthfully as I can. There is no one way. Although a great way to start is to watch your favorite movies and break them down into smaller scenes. Here's an example of something I did. I watched Bad Boys by Michael Bay, starring Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, right? And I answered the 5 W's. What's the story about? 2 detectives that work to solve a friend's murder, as well as they have to find the stolen drugs of their biggest bust. Who is the story about? It's about Mike Lowry and Marcus Bennett, and they're both detectives. Where does the story take place? Miami, Florida. When does the story take place? It's current day. Why is this story necessary? Kind of like figuring out the theme. Well, according to what I gather, it's really about revenge, respect, and familyhood versus singleness, like singlehood. Then, so after I have broken down the first act, I'll go into the second act of how I look at the story, and this is how I will outline this if I was writing this, right, per se. But you also have to remember that Act 2 is told in 2 distinct parts. We'll label this section Act 2A, and we'll have a midpoint, and then we'll go into Act 2B. So in Act 2A is where Marcus and Mike pursue the drug thieves and the murderers, and they also have to take care of a witness. They get a witness. By the midpoint, and this is where it also gives a false resolve. In this case, the false resolve is when Mike and Marcus have to find the thieves and the killers of Mike's friend, but the eyewitness take it upon themselves to exact revenge for the friend's death. So now it's a false resolve to try to find out what's going on, who's doing it, which leads us into Act 2B. And in this section is where Mike and Marcus are no longer the pursuers, but the pursued. Because once their cover is blown and they're determined that they are the cops, then the thieves and the killers are after them. So remember, Act 2 is told into 2 different halves, which are linked together by a midpoint, which leads us to the climax where Marcus's wife discovers him with another woman. Of course, it's the eyewitness, right? So again, false revelations. This is where the thieves and the killers find Mike and Marcus and attempt to kill them. And we transcend and move right on over to Act 3. After the climax, all hell breaks loose. I mean, this is the final push to the end of the movie where Marcus and Mike become the pursuers again. This is where they re-enter the old world with new information and resources to finish the job. In this section, we also want to answer the major dramatic question. Will Mike and Marcus retrieve the drugs and avenge Mike's friends' killers? That's the end, right? And lastly, I would not be a great instructor if I didn't give you a quick hint on how to outline your screenplay. Just some quick, more information for you, right? Remember in an earlier podcast, I talked about characters and that characters have an inner and outer journey. This is the best place to map their inner and outer journey, right? So we know that the outer journey is that physical journey, and we can see that at the end from the beginning. What are they trying to obtain? What are they trying to get in the physical world, in the physical realm, in the physical world? But I'm encouraging you to map your inner journey at this moment. The emotional map, that emotional arc, that emotional growth, that emotional transformation. And this is a great place to start in the outline. You know where you want them to be emotionally and where they came from emotionally. Could you sell this outline if you wrote it this way? I mean, would it, or could it be really possible to sell this? And I'm going to be honest, my answer is yes. There is no one way to sell a movie, just like there is no one way to write a screenplay or outline one. Many movies were sold based on an outline or a treatment. You don't always have to have the screenplay, but keep in mind, you got to be ready to write the screenplay if you sell the treatment, or accept that someone else may write your movie based on your outline or treatment, right? So make sure you are outlining before you write a screenplay. I hope this episode has in some small way helped you today. And as I always say, writing is a spiritual journey, and always be writing. We appreciate your support. Be sure to leave a review and a comment and share with your closest screenwriting friends. Stop by www.derityton.com for the Film Mechanics Screenwriting Workbook, and we'll see you next episode. Have an awesome day. Peace.